we have the next segment with my dear friend who works with us in Singapore, but he represents WWF United States. And that's how beautiful our network is. And he'll be hosting a panel with someone we value a lot, and she was at the Biodiversity COP last year. But before that, we just want to show you a quick video to set the ground for what she's been working on. Can we have the short video? Yep.
After living for nearly 100 years on this planet, I now understand the most important place on Earth is not on land, but at sea.
Through the course of my life, we have been on a voyage of ocean discovery. Only now are we understanding what it means for the future of our world. What we have found could change everything.
For once you've truly seen the sea, you'll never look at Earth in the same way again. The ocean is our planet's life support system and our greatest ally against climate catastrophe.
Yet it's at a crossroads.
We are draining the life from our ocean. Today, it is in such poor health, I would find it hard not to lose hope, were it not for the most remarkable discovery of all. The ocean can recover faster than we had ever imagined. It can bounce back to life. Put simply, we've been given a lifeline. It may not just recover, but thrive beyond anything anyone alive has ever seen. This is the story of our ocean, and how we must write its next chapter together. For if we save the sea, we save our world. After a lifetime of filming our planet, I'm sure that nothing is more important.
Was my other goosebumps moment. So David Attenborough, please, he is a legend. He's a living legend. In his 90s, he manages to do this, and the new series is on oceans, and that's something that we are discovering. So without any further ado, I would like to now invite on stage Dr. Madhu Rao, Chair of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas, and Rohit Singh, Director of Protected and Conserved Areas Management and Governance, WWF United States.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we are talking about climate, nature, and transition. In next 25 minutes, we will try to bring all this back to ground, biodiversity conservation, because it has to make difference for biodiversity on the ground. I've spent most of my time in the bush. So the first place where I started my career, to make a phone call, I had to walk for 8 hours. So I will try to make sure that all this connects to on-ground conservation. And that's why you see me dressed like this. The only two people who can make me wear formals is my wife and Prince William. Otherwise, I do not wear formals. WWF has given up on me on wearing formals. So before I start, I just want to share the crisis we are facing. WWF report shows that we have lost 75% of our wildlife population since 1970s. Only 24% of our national parks and wildlife sanctuaries have good management. Believe it or not, there are more people sitting in this room now than any national park on the planet. So we have more hairdressers in the UK than number of people managing our national parks. So that's the crisis we are facing in terms of biodiversity. What we're going to do today is when we will discuss when we lose species and forest, we are not only losing a charismatic animal, we are losing a lot more than that. We are losing the ecosystem services that we all depend on. So also want to highlight that it's not all doom and gloom. We are making progress in many places. There are areas where we are recovering species. There are areas where the forest restoration is happening. But it's a complex subject, and that's why we have Dr. Madhu Rao with us. She is chair of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas and also regional director, South Asia for Wildlife Conservation Society. So thanks, Madhu, for joining us. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rohit and WWF for having me here. I'm very honored to be here with all of you as the chair of IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas. There is, of course, a huge amount of momentum that we've all seen toward climate and nature, of course. And as you've just said, Rohit, that nature is disappearing. There's huge evidence all over the world. The scientific evidence is very clear. We've just seen what Sir David Attenborough has told us about what we're doing to the natural ecosystems around the world. So there is a clear crisis, and there is widespread consensus around the world that we have to move from business as usual toward a recovery of nature. And so how do we do that? And we have climate to consider with all of this. So let's talk about nature and climate in this session, Rohit.
Thanks, Madhu. And we have heard a lot since morning about the crisis, and it's acknowledged that we are going through a biodiversity crisis. In your opinion, is nature conservation, biodiversity protection being neglected in this global momentum towards addressing climate change? And how do we bring much needed focus to the protection of nature?
Yeah, so I think it's great we have an opportunity to bring nature back to the forefront. And I think that it is important to do, and I'm going to make the case as to why it is important to do. I think we have an opportunity to focus on nature-based solutions, as we've heard this morning. That is really convenient, that if we can save nature and address climate at the same time, then we're doing good. But I want to make a case for why we do need an explicit and exclusive focus on nature. I think in alignment with what the WWF report showed, I think it's extraordinary, the human footprint. We have impacted 95% of the Earth's surface in one form or another. We are using Earth's resources at an unprecedented and an unsustainable rate. So we've got to remember the scale of human footprint is very, very significant. But I think it's important to know that governments have come together. 196 governments came together in 2022 in December in Montreal to commit to protecting and conserving a third of the Earth's surface. That's the marine ecosystems, the terrestrial ecosystems, the inland water ecosystems. So there is policy momentum for us to move forward on a focus for nature. And as we move forward into this conversation, I want to say a little bit about how we need to unpack nature. Is it the lawn outside Marina Bay Sands, or is it a tropical forest? So let's move toward sort of unpacking what nature means. To sort of focus a little bit on the 30%, when we talk about a third, and that's the commitment that's been made globally, it's important to sort of look at the remaining 70% and what we need to focus on that 30%. Because at the moment, we're trying to do everything. We're trying to include production landscapes, commercial fisheries, commercial logging areas into that 30% that everyone agreed needs to be protected and managed. There is a difference. This 30% that we're talking about across the Earth systems. These are areas that are important for biodiversity and ecosystem services. These are areas that need to be managed to achieve biodiversity outcomes. And we've got to separate that from those areas that are useful for humans, the agricultural plantations, the commercial logging, commercial fisheries, and production landscapes. So that's going to be one key message, if that is, for this talk, which is to make sure that we understand that we cannot use it all. We've got to protect, we've got to set aside, and we've got to sort of restrain human footprint.
So what are the barriers in all this? There are a lot of business leaders sitting there here, and one thing which I feel like there's this 30 by 30 target. We have to protect 30% of the planet, and which is great. It's like building a hospital, nice hospital, but nobody is talking about people who are going to do the job. And without that, it's not going to work. So what are the barriers in achieving this?
Yeah, so let's move to the barriers. There we go. So I think just starting from the commitment that we've seen a global policy commitment towards 30%. And the barriers are, to start with, political. The first thing is we need ambition at national levels. We need national targets. We need political commitment at national scales by national governments for protection and restoration. So it's not enough that all the governments have come together and said, yes, we're going to protect 30%. We're going to have to see that ambition reflected at national scales, and that's not there yet. There is movement, there is momentum by governments. Certain governments, from the rich world, need to pull up the less income, lower income governments, countries. But really, we are not seeing the political commitment that's needed for protection of nature. Secondly, deriving from this lack of policy alignment and political ambition at national scales is finance. I have to talk finance to this crowd, so I'll do my best. So I understand that the funding gap, everyone talks of financing gaps, for the protection of 30% of nature is around 103 to 178 billion annually, which is about 0.3% of the global GDP. So that's some big numbers, but I really want to focus in on some national level, statistics. So if you look at that graph there, the majority of commitment, financial commitment, needs to come from domestic budgets and tax policies. I think the private sector has a role to play, as does philanthropy, as do sustainable supply chains and nature-based solutions and carbon markets. But those are just part of the solution, and they cannot replace what national governments have to increase in their allocations towards the protection of nature. So that's the big message, that we need political will, and we need that political will and policy alignment and ambition at national scales to translate to commitment to increase domestic budgets and tax policies.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Madhu. I want to go a bit more into it. So what are the emerging opportunities? Where should the direct greater investment towards? What is working well? And what are some of the needs for protected area personnel and ranger community?
Yeah, so I am going to hazard another graph up there. And I think in terms of opportunities, and I know many people in the private sector are well aware of the mitigation hierarchy. We've heard a lot about nature positive today. I think we want to sort of unpack what is nature positive. And I think, again, nature positive, like nature-based solutions, means different things to different people, right? But I want to say one thing. The mitigation hierarchy really provides an excellent opportunity and a framework for investment, because it talks to us about the need to avoid. We have to avoid development. We have to avoid infrastructure in certain high-priority ecosystems. There is no way around that. We cannot have business as usual. So the mitigation hierarchy seeks to avoid in those areas which have to be no-go areas because they are so important, because they're so irreplaceable. Then you have minimizing, then you have restoring, and then you have offsets. At the moment, the dialogue is all about offsets. It's right, let's destroy nature and let's find an offset. So I think the mitigation hierarchy sort of pulls us back to step one, which is to avoid. And you know, this also helps us understand what net positive impact is looking like. We can only talk about net positive if we've gone through the steps of the mitigation hierarchy. So that's one opportunity. The second opportunity is, of course, investing in the workforce. So if we think about protecting and conserving and managing a third of the Earth's surface, we have to think about the workforce, the human workforce that we need to develop and to equip and to skill in order to do that. We need rangers like yourself, Rohit. We need to quadruple the number of rangers and protected area personnel we have in the world if we are going to do this well, if we are going to protect a third of the planet really properly. We need to equip the workforce. We've got to invest in them. We've got to professionalize the workforce. And moving on to a future for nature and people. Rohit, if I can just continue.
Yes, please.
So I heard a lot about finance, and there was a really interesting finance question in the previous panel. And I said, oh, I had the answer to that, or I think other people do have answers. And that's the exciting thing. I mean, there is huge momentum. The narrative has changed at the moment. 10 years ago, it was the private sector were the bad guys. And I'm happy to say from the conservation world, it's no longer looking that way, right? Everyone's in it, and everyone's in it together. And there are emerging models that are looking really promising. So we can refer to what Enduring Earth calls Project Finance for Permanence. These are all new models, so the Project Finance for Permanence is a blend of private, public financing together with philanthropy. So we need proofs of evidence, right? We need to show some things are working, but there is work afoot. Then we've got the Nature Conservancy's nature bonds, which seek to unlock funds for conservation and climate action. So there is financing thought going into developing financial instruments that can preserve nature, can preserve the integrity of nature, as well as address climate change. So I think there's hope in that. And I also want to talk about the need to incentivize standing forests. We want to incentivize countries to hang on to forests. We heard about deforestation this morning. We heard about the progress that's being made. But are the incentive systems right? We need to ensure that we can incentivize the protection of high integrity tropical forests. We want to incentivize them in such a way that carbon is restored, or we are creating carbon sinks at the same time as we are protecting biodiversity. And I just want to say, Rohit, while I have the mic, that this is where the unpacking of nature comes in. Not all nature is equal, right? You have some forms of ecosystems that are incredibly important, high biodiversity ecosystems. You have a high biodiversity, high integrity tropical forest that's far more important as a nature-based solution than a plantation. And so we've got to get into the nuances of things. So yes, nature-based solutions is fantastic as a starting point, but we've got to get deep. We've got to unpack what nature is more important than other nature, and so on and so forth.
Right, and it is a buzzword, nature-based solution. It's sort of conservation has taken a back seat because everybody talks about nature-based solution. So if you can give me a tangible example how nature-based solution can make impact on the ground if it is done in a right way.
Yeah, so I just want to dwell for a few minutes on nature-based solutions. And I heard the word regulation, right? And that's great. So I think the first thing we want to avoid with nature-based solutions is greenwashing. That's the first thing that comes to all the conservationists' mind, by the way. So nature-based solutions can be anything. It can be that piece of grass outside the Marina Bay Sands, because it is conserving soil. So there are standards that we need to fulfill, and I'm so glad I have my colleague from IUCN here, Manuel, who you heard from earlier today. We have a standard. There are rigorous global standards for nature-based solutions. So the first thing to do it right is follow a standard, a recognized nature-based solution standard. So that's really important. If you ask the question, when can nature-based solutions really protect nature? I'll say the answer to that is when nature-based solutions protect some of the most high carbon value, high biodiversity ecosystems like mangroves, like tropical forests, like peatlands. So that is when nature-based solutions can achieve the dual goals of nature protection as well as addressing climate change.
Thanks, Madhu. Our time is up, but I still want to ask you one last thing. In 10 seconds, if you can tell this crowd, as a chair of World Commission on Protected Areas, what they should keep in mind for when it comes to protected areas.
Yes, well, protected areas are a proven measure to protect nature. So let's make sure we support countries around the world to expand their protected area systems. And it's not just about the quantity, it's not just about the 30%, it's about the quality. We want high quality protected areas delivering on nature outcomes. But the last thing I want to say is resilience. And we heard that in the movie that was shown by our dear moderator. And that's the word resilience. If we can allow nature some place to recover, to not to be used, nature is resilient. Oceans can bounce back. We've got huge evidence to show that there is recovery ongoing. We have to ensure the enabling conditions are there for nature to be protected, to be allowed to recover. And that's where protected areas play a big role.
Thanks a lot, Madhu.
Okay. Thank you.
For those insightful remarks. What stayed with me in that discussion was to protect nature for nature's sake, and not just for nature-based solutions as a climate mitigation problem or a solution. So we should be looking at nature for nature itself. And I want to remind everyone we have a booth there on my left, and we have just launched our mid-year campaign for coral reef restoration. So if you're curious to know more about how to protect nature for nature's sake, our team is here and they can tell you more about that. And we'll have a video playing during the break as well.